Welcome to the episode of Locked In. This is going to be a review of the Poseidon Atlas bike. In this review, we're going to be going over specs, my riding impressions, who I think this bike is good for, pricing, and my final thoughts. So let's get into it. First off, the specs. This bike is an all-aluminum 6061 frame and fork. It has a Shimano 8-speed Altus drivetrain with a triple crankset up front. For a total of 24 gears, they do use the rapid-fire thumb shifters and Shimano hydraulic disc brakes. The wheels are wrapped in a 28C road tire, and it comes with the Poseidon branded saddle, and as you can see, a straight handlebar. Now let's get into my initial riding impressions. Poseidon ships you this bike direct, and I had to assemble it, and to get their full warranty, you do need to take it to a shop, so keep that in mind. But out of the box, the derailleurs were actually really well tuned. I didn't really need to do anything or do any major adjustments. Getting this thing on the road, it rides like a typical aluminum bike. It is going to be a little chattery if you have these tires at full PSI, just because aluminum has a characteristic of transferring road vibration a little bit more than steel or carbon fiber, obviously. So you do get a little bit of road buzz, but it's not too bad. If you drop the PSI on the tires slightly, it does help smooth the ride out a lot. The saddle they put on this is definitely really cushiony and is definitely comfortable without needing bike shorts. Just for me, I don't think it's the right style of saddle in my opinion for that bike. I think it needs to be a little bit flatter in the nose and a little bit longer, since you're sitting a little forward on this. Since it is a hybrid, you're not sitting fully upright or back like you would on a cruiser or a comfort bike. So the little bump on the nose was kind of bothering me. If I really sat up more than I'd really want to, it was more comfortable, but that's definitely a personal preference as far as saddle design goes. Being a straight bar, it's definitely comfortable. The hydraulic brakes were really good and really surprisingly strong for basically the cheapest Shimano hydraulic brakes you can get. As well as I was actually kind of impressed with the Grupo. The rear derailleur shifts really easily, and the front does take a little bit of effort and doesn't always get the gear that you want the first click or the first time every single time. Obviously this is a budget group set and that's typical of that. But overall the bike was pretty comfortable. On the street, the 28C tires do make this slightly heavier bike feel pretty snappy on the road, and it actually got up to speed relatively well, and I was able to maintain an easy 20 miles an hour on the flats without really putting in a ton of effort. On the opposite side, it's got a triple crankset, so that granny gear is super low, and I never even needed it for any minor hill or anything. But if you want to put a rack on this thing and load it up with stuff, you have tons of gear options that you're never going to be feeling like you're carrying a ton on the back of the bike. I wasn't a big fan of the grips that were on the bike, but again, that's another personal preference item. The design was kind of cool looking, but I didn't really find it very comfortable. My big takeaway from this is this bike would be so much more comfortable with a bigger tire on it, and it definitely has the clearance for it. And I've talked to the company, apparently that might be an option or something they might do a rolling changeover in the future, but they wanted to spec it with a lot extra space so you could actually fit a pretty big tire to take this, on or off-road. Segueing me, my off-roading I did on the bike, I just did some light gravel stuff, as you can see in this video clip, just to see how it would feel, and it definitely rode fine on the dirt. It wasn't too chattery. These tires have a slight tread in them, which help with traction in my opinion. When it was a little bit steeper sand or softer gravel, it did tend to wander a little bit on me. But like I said, if you could put a bigger tire on this thing would be a pretty big beast on or off the street, no matter what potholes or dirt or anything you want to go ride on. This would make this thing way more comfortable, but you would obviously sacrifice the effort level and speed and a little bit of the weight going up in size of the tire, but I think for this bike, most people would probably enjoy that. Now let's get into who this bike is for. Basically, I think this bike is for anybody looking for a casual bike that's obviously more upright than a road bike, and that has a really big tire clearance because they want to possibly ride it off-road, or they have bad streets in their city or anything like that, and want something that's definitely utilitarian, since this frame features full mounts for rear rack, front fenders, and rear fenders. That being said, it really tailors to anybody from the commuter to someone who's just looking into getting their first bike or a basic bike for basic fitness. It definitely meets all those criteria, and you get a big benefit of having hydraulic brakes at this price point. Which leads me into price. This bike is currently priced at $450. Factor into the price, you are going to have to take this to a bike shop, and depending on how much they need to do to it, now you can obviously avoid this if you want to avoid the warranty, which I never recommend, so it's worth the extra money. But factor in, you're going to be probably spending, I'm assuming, between $35 to $65 roughly to get the bike set up, depending on how much work it needs. And so you're into this bike about $500, I would say. At that price, with the bike shop fee factored in, with hydraulic brakes, it's actually a really good deal for the money, especially if you like the murdered out look like the one I have, or they also have some other colors available. Lastly, let's get into my final thoughts. I was really actually overall pretty impressed with this bike for the price point. Now, there are some things I'm not a big fan of. I mentioned already, I think this bike should come with at least a 35C tire. It'd probably fit up to a 38. 35 for the street though would be definitely way more comfortable, and you wouldn't sacrifice that much in weight and speed compared to the 28 realistically, especially for the rider I see for this bike. I wasn't a big fan of the saddle or the grips, like I said. But I think this bike with the bigger tire set would be honestly way better. It definitely was an easy ride. It rode well. The geometry felt right for this bike. It didn't feel too long or too low in the front end. You're nice and upright, but not too upright or where you feel like you're on a comfort bike or a cruiser, which is great. And I think that definitely suits this bike well. The overall weight actually isn't that bad. I was able to shoulder this bike. I just wanted to try it just basically to test, like, if you had to carry it up to your dorm room or upstairs to your apartment or whatever. It's easy enough to shoulder. The tubing doesn't pinch your shoulder because it's slightly ovalized, so you don't get it right in the shoulder where it's really annoying. So overall, I was pretty impressed. If this was something I was keeping long term, I would definitely swap some things out like I mentioned. And then I think this thing would be an awesome urban assault vehicle that can definitely shred on your local single track if you want to explore a little bit, go bike camping with, or you just want a really burly commuter that can carry all your books and bags and clothes and whatever for commuting or school or work. So I think this definitely fits that model. It's a little more beefy than a lot of other hybrids in this segment, in my opinion. And that's because it's meant for a little bit more dirt abuse than your typical hybrid. So if that's something you're looking into doing, or those type of roads or trails around your area, I think this is a great match for you. So thanks for watching this episode. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn notifications on so you see all my weekly content that I put out on this channel, as well as follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All my links in the description below. And if you want to win cool cycling stuff free, you can support me on Patreon. I give away something every single month. So thanks for watching another episode of Locked In.